Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry about that loud noise if you just heard it. A bit of feedback here in the studio whilst I've been sorting out my situation here. Hello and welcome. Are we live? Yes, we are. To another Listen with Vobes. I'm Richard Vobes. Very welcome of you to join me this afternoon on the 15th, I believe, of February 2021 at 4 o'clock. Maybe a different time where you are. Who knows? I may have to duck out to answer the door. The delivery I was supposed to have Friday, which didn't come, has been rearranged. It then said it was going to come on Tuesday, and now it's coming today. But it may not. Who knows? It's supposed to be. It's out for delivery. So sorry to do that. Hello to everybody out there. Hello to Turbo Stream, to the lovely Julia, to Justine Jones, to Audrey Forbes Hamilton, to Ben Reeve, to Billabong O'Neill, to Jen Colley, to Cooper68, to Dave Evad, to Ed Loud and Linda Kane. Hello to you all. It's very nice to be with you this afternoon on it started off as a miserable, wet and boring Monday morning. I've got my lovely usual here, ginger and lemon. It seems to be going down very nicely. Eases the throat no end, don't you know? And we will be reading the Peep Show on chapter, whatever that is, 17, I think it is. That will be the aim. So, Sensible says, just off to frighten the life out of my cat with the noise. I beg your pardon. Have you been cleaning the Essie, says Linda Kane. Yes, I have, actually. I've just got it lit. I haven't been cleaning it. It probably could do with a clean, actually. I'll probably do it at the end of this week. Probably need a shave as well. Yes. What else? I did the front room fire because it was a bit chilly. I was reading about farming techniques, early primitive farming techniques, and reading about fields and all that. I have no idea how I'm going to incorporate them into a video because it all seems quite complicated but very simple, and then without all the tools of the trade, without access to footage of all of that, it's so difficult to try and sort of explain these things. So I don't know how I should do it, if I will. Anyway, never mind all that nonsense. Edward Moulding, hello to you. It's lovely to see you here. So as I just said before, for those of you who are hard of hearing, sorry to be rude, I may have to just duck out to answer the door if it goes in the hour. But seeing as it hasn't arrived yet, who knows, probably be next week. So we're on chapter 17. Westward Ho, chasing a vicar, a long walk, and I nearly get married. Not me. You know what I mean. The story. The permission to show in Bideford being exhausted, my 4 days there came to an end, and I was soon plunged into restless and fruitless journeyings. I was attracted to the romantic places of Westward Ho and Appledore, but this part of the world is very hilly, and my desire to investigate these towns suffered a severe testing. All the morning I was occupied with tugging my vehicle up stiff hills, and had this not been a land of heroes, had I not felt that Francis Drake and his wild men had their eye upon me, I might have turned back to the level roads on the other side of the water. By midday I was through the decent old town of Northam, lunching under a hedge on the hilltop, and after I had went down to Westward Ho, only to realise the truth of a pessimistic pavement artist whom I met on the way, and who said to me, "It's a bloomin' rotten hole. You won't do much, methinks, here." Two farmers were adverse to my camping, but finally I was sent to an old man whom I would find working on his allotment. The distinguished old greybeard proved amiable, and leaving his hoeing, conducted me to a narrow strip of grass about the size of a billiard table. "Here you are," he said. in between my oats and my tatters. I got a bit of hay off there, you see, and you won't do no harm. You can fix up there for a bob. It was a horrible place in which to camp, shut in, as I was, by bungalows and houses, but as a storm was imminent, I paid over the shilling and set up the tent, and had just time to crawl in when the rain thundered down. After the shower, I surveyed the prospects for a show and found 6 people on the wide beach, 6 at tea in a cafe, and another 6 strolling about. Then enormous clouds rose out of the sea, the wind blew cold and strong, and these few people disappeared. So I crawled into the tent, a disappointed man, a disillusioned romantist, a broken reed, with the impression that Westward Ho was a stormy, deserted place, that it was not the old-fashioned place I had expected, but a new affair of bungalows and builders' villas, of these melancholy, laid-out roads without any houses in them except a lost shop or 2 stuck at the corner. In fact, a miserable hole without a penny in it for a Punch and Judy man. I spent the next morning in chasing a vicar. Quite unanticipated sport when I first set out to be a showman. I wanted his permission to perform in his elementary school at Northam, but he was an elusive vicar, and I did not catch him. I questioned and sought until I concluded that the people of Northam were teasing me, and became convinced that they do not really possess a vicar at all. And then it was my turn to be chased, more by rain, back to the tent where I sat for some hours expecting the tabernacle to be broken down and blown up at any moment. But the wind and the rain struck such an exact balance that I was preserved, the hurricane being prevented from ripping up the tent by the heavy weight of the rain which was holding it down. I was proud of my little tent when I came out after the storm and found the streets littered with tiles, and about 50 yards away an astonished-looking house which, under persuasion from wind, had foolishly deposited all its roof in the street below. A very unnecessary and false burst of sunshine inspired me to pack up the show and climb to Northam to perform in the street there. I arrived just in time to escape under the awning of a butcher's shop from more rain. With a raggle-taggle of street urchins, I wandered from the awning to doorways and arches, these boys accompanying me, urging me voraciously, and not without contempt, to show in the rain. It was a sodden showman that crawled into an equally sodden tent between the oats and the tatters at Westward Ho that evening. But it is surprising to think how comfortable he was, with a book, a pipe, and a candle, whilst the silly elements outside exhibited such a useless ferocity. But the first day of August brought new weather with it. After the storm there seemed more room to breathe in the world, and what a bright new world it was that day! What a bright and purple sea, with line after line of great white breakers thundering and chasing one another up the beach. All the earth was as lovely as the sea, and from time to time I wandered from the road to climb an eminence from which I might see and enjoy this fairy scene. For one of these indulgent moments I had left the truck in the road and was seated on a 5-bar gate which was screened by thick hedges. I was admiring the view and speculating on what I might buy in town for a roadside lunch, when I was suddenly aware of this dispute going on between an invisible man and woman coming down the lane.
Why, whatever is that?
Dunno.
It's Punch and Judy's show.
It isn't.
Yes, it is.
'Tisn't.
It is. Snot. I'm sure it is, Tony.
I am quite sure it's not.
It's the framework of a Punch and Judy without the outside on.
At this moment, the couple came in sight of the owner, sitting on the gate, when the lady immediately appealed to me, and I was sorry to find that my corroboration put a terrible weapon into her hands, for she exulted over and twitted the husband unmercifully as they passed on down the road. It had been my intention on setting out in the morning to walk to Appledore and take the ferry from there over the water to Instow, for this was Wednesday, one of the days when I might expect an audience there. But before I turned off to Appledore, I met a man who knew all about it, a dark-haired man in a blue jersey, who surprised me with his practical insight into the matter. "You take my advice, mate," he said. "You'll pull it round through Bideford, and you'll find it'll pay you. It's a good road, it is, and you're young, and you can do a turn in Bideford on the way. If the devils on the quay get hold of you, they'll treat you like a stranger and get every penny out of you they can. Mind, I'm not blaming them. You see, they got the visitors round them now, and they make them pay, and if you think you're a stranger, they'll have it out of you. You go by the road, it'll pay you every time. Of course, you can do as you like. I'm only a working man, and I don't want to help those who've got too much already. Now, the water people here with the money do what they like. We used to go out in the ferry on the gravel dry shod, but now they help themselves to the gravel, and you'll find yourself pulling your bus across 20 yards of sand. You go round, mate. It'll pay you every time." I took his advice. Behind that rough speech there was a wealth of knowledge and intelligence respecting my affairs. I was so impressed by this dark-eyed man that rather than encounter the perils of 100 yards by water, I decided to walk the 6 miles to Instow round through Bideford. By midday I was clear of the town and clambering up a bank to a shady lawn in a pine wood. Here I lunched, and through the trees watched the boats go up and down the sunny river. In the quiet wood 2 squirrels chased one another around the tree, and 1 sparrowhawk circled around about me, hovering and searching for prey. It was a thrilling experience to be so near so wild a bird, to see its fierce expression, the cut of its wings, and all the markings of its handsome plumage. And I began to wonder if I would develop a character like that for a showman, besides being an amusing dog. And I began to wonder if I would develop a character like that for a showman, besides being an amusing dog, has to be something of a hawk, seeking out his audience, upon which he can descend at the right time and carry off the pennies. A mouse amused me for some time too. It ran up and down the stems of plants looking for food, and now and again it came to a standstill to look at me suspiciously. With these little peeps into animal life, and under the influence of the dreamy afternoon, I quite forgot about Instow, and that my show was standing out on the road ready to be pulled there. But I was stirred to action at last. There came stumbling through the bushes a man who, having seen my truck outside the wood, had taken the trouble to search me out and tell me excitedly that he had just sold some cattle, that consequently he had been enjoying some drinks until the public house had closed down, and that now he was on his way to a friend who had a cask of cider where he intended to complete his potations, or potations. Then he came to the thrilling news. He had just come from Instow, where he had seen thousands and thousands of people arriving in carts, and having seen my show on the road, he had come into the wood to tell me that I ought to go there. I set off at once, and I arrived at Instow, but not having any cider for lunch, I didn't find those thousands and thousands of people on the shore. I found enough to encourage me to perform 3 times to 3 convenient audiences who did not run away when the showman came round with the hat. They stood their ground, they sent their children up to me with pennies, and they paid me in compliments as well as coins, which made me feel I was receiving a just reward and not begging. I was still very self-conscious and indifferent. I was still a very self-conscious and indifferent collector. It is such a vague way of being paid that where to begin or where to end in these irregular crowds was an unfathomable mystery to me. I sometimes began on the outside and sometimes on the inside, but more usually drifted about as the pennies were pro-offered. It's the same with me on the internet when I come round with my hat and say, I've been reading for you, lovely people. How about a little donation to keep the wolf from the door? Oh, is that the wolf?
Yeah, I'm coming to get ya.
If I pay you some pennies, will you go away?
Oh, yes, of course.
Just a moment. Pay me some pennies so I can get rid of the wolf. Yes. Anyway, how are you all? Are you all right? Are you enjoying it so far? We have been running for about 14 minutes. Blimey. Sunny but cold midday walk, says Edward Moulding. Skiff says, did your parcel come yet? No, I'm waiting, still waiting. In the end, I rang up. In the end, they said it was going to come the next day, which was Saturday. Then it was going to come Sunday. My son, Billy, had a parcel delivery from Amazon on Sunday, and we assumed it would come in the same delivery van. Didn't come. I rang them up. They said, oh, I'm ever so sorry. Must have got lost in the post. Does happen. It's like, well, that's no bloody good. I've been waiting since Friday, thank you. Oh, well, we'll give you the money back and you can reorder it. So they gave me the money back and I reordered it. I said, what if it comes in the meantime? Oh, well, you can keep it. Oh, but it hasn't come in the meantime. Somebody's pocketed it, I imagine. I went to Westward Ho many, many long years ago, says TurboStream. What was it like? Audrey Forbes says, ouch, that'll be Ginger and Sweetie again. Yes, Ginger and Sweetie. Oh. Very tasty. Turbo says we could play What Time Does the Parcel Arrive? Bingo. We could. Do you think it will arrive in the show? Will I be wrenched from my chair? And will I hasten to the door like a running man? Or will I just sort of saunter out there? 16:43 p.m, says Audrey. Ben Reeves says 5-minute interval. Sweepstakes, anyone? Turbo says 16:34. Lee Lawson. Oops, I was looking at the clock that hasn't worked for years and realised that it said 3:30. YouTube didn't pop up in the usual reminder. I beg your pardon about that. I do apologise. Linda Kane says, had no idea why Westward Ho was so called. It always makes me smile to find out. The village name comes from the title of Charles Kingsley's 1855 novel, Westward Ho. Yes, that does ring a bell, actually, because I have been to Westward Ho years and years ago when I was doing some corporate work, and I was driven around, so I don't really remember it. And of course, we were interviewing people. We went round Westward Ho, and I remember thinking, Westward Ho? And thinking, there's not much here, is there? So I don't quite know, it sounds more exciting than it actually is. Which was set in nearby Bideford, says Linda Kano, this book by Charles Kingsley. The book was a bestseller and entrepreneurs saw the opportunity to develop tourism in the area. I bought the book. I thought the book was named after the place. Wrong! It's got me into trouble on many occasions. I have an inquiring mind. Yes, I have an inquiring mind as well. An inquiring mind that never seems to be satisfied. Anyway, the trouble with my inquiring mind is I never quite understand when people say you can extract Marmite through the cells of yeast. I don't understand how you do that. But let's not start that debate. Thank you. Lee Lawson says, my grandfather was in a concert party at Westward Ho in the 1920s for a couple of seasons. My goodness. The only place in the UK with an exclamation mark in the name. Rather large pebbles on the beach, not as comfy as golden sand. I didn't realise it had the exclamation mark in it. Isn't there a something else ho? Eastward Ho or something. And there's another Ho down there, isn't there? In Davern. Anyway, away we go. At last the collection that afternoon I commenced you see, you'd get one word mispronounced or misspoken. It changes the whole sentence. At the last collection that afternoon, I commenced with 2 old dames. Lovely terminology. I commenced with 2 old dames who immediately caught up their purses and dropped something into the hat. "Very good, I call it," said one of them, and they both smiled encouragingly. I passed to a stout, solid man who, all alone, had stood grinning through the whole performance. His hand came out of his trouser pocket, and there was another clink in the hat, and he looked at me approvingly with twinkling eyes. Then 2 children ran up to me, crying, "Here, mister, here you are," and I stooped to receive a penny from each, while in the background a fond mother nodded and smiled. A hearty middle-aged woman leaned over the wall to reach for the hat. She was a capable-looking housewife. Could you explain what that means? A capable-looking housewife. You're a capable-looking housewife. Oh, thank you very much. What do you mean? What do you imply? Capable at what, young man? Thank you. Get out of here, you snivelling... No, I was just saying you're capable of being a housewife, as opposed to incapable of doing housewifery. It's a bizarre expression, capable housewife. You've got to laugh, haven't you? It's the first laugh I've had all day. Are there any capable housewives watching? I'd like to know if you are capable as opposed to incapable. Dear, oh dear. She was a capable-looking housewife, and one would imagine her more interested in nourishing recipes or bargains in shops than a street performance. But she wanted to know if I would be there the next day, as she would like to bring some friends. 4 young workmen sitting far away on the wall whistled and beckoned to me, all contributing to the collection, and one saying, "That's all right, mate, that is." Then several children ran up to ask when the next performance would begin, and when I said in half an hour, they ran off excitedly to tell their friends, and all sat down in front of the show to wait. A smiling man contributed for a little group. "Here you are. We've only just come, but it was very good what we did see." I walked round from group to group and back to the show, and with the secrecy of the curtains counted out the results of the 3 collections, which was a mass of copper composed of 97 pennies, 35 halfpennies, and 2 threepenny pieces and a sixpence. I pitched my tent again next to the Harmer, the roundabout man. Oh, to Harmer, that's his name, isn't it? Harmer, the roundabout man. And as the next day was very wet, we were thrown a good deal upon each other's company. He was sorry to hear that I was going away and would not be in Instow again. He went all over his project again about a set of swings, and so persuasively that I began to see that he wanted me as a partner. I was to buy the swings. "You know," he said, "you ought to get married. You ought to get engaged. There's a good living on this beach for a girl with a pair of fortune-telling birds. They are very paying and pretty. Pretty little birds, you know, and a nice girl, well-dressed, nothing shabby, you know, with a pair of them little birds could do well. You won't be here on Monday, will you? But one of my daughters is coming up to help me with them lemonade. She's a good girl, she is. One for them writing the letters, all about the sea and the lovely waves and how nice it all is. Pages of it. She's clean. Oh, yeah. She's always washing herself. Yeah, she's coming up to help me on Monday with the lemonade. But you'll be gone by then, won't you? pity, but you ought to get engaged. I can tell you, I went up in my own estimation after this conversation. It is not bad to be able to make a Punch and Judy theatre, carry through some sort of performance, but to be looked upon as something of a business proposition, to be courted by a future father-in-law, both as a partner and a son-in-law, was a degree of social respect which I hardly expected to find as an itinerant performer. I was regretful that I should not be able to see the girl. The prospect presented it to me very favourably. I saw it all before me, the gay sight on the sunny shore, the golden sand and the blue sea. It would not be a bad little life, to be the proprietor of a juvenile set of swings, to stand about all day on the shore, to help the children in and out the swings and take their tuppences and say, "Thank you, my dear." And all the while there would be the clean girl, well-dressed, wandering about with the two pretty little lovebirds, telling fortunes. And in the evening, while father-in-law and I pulled down the horses and the swings and packed them away under the tarpaulin, what good suppers the good girl would be cooking for us in the van among the dunes. And what a collection of pennies the three of us would have to count out each night after supper. And what a good time we could give the people for their pennies. All the fortunes would be good ones, and the father-in-law, all the fortunes would be good ones, and father-in-law would do the children well on the horses. As for me, I would know how to give the children, the little dears, long swings on those days when there was not so many about. But on the busy days it would be necessary for the swings to be shorter, so that all of them would have the pleasure of spending their tuppences before the day was over. But one cannot do everything in this world, and the scheme, unfortunately, could never materialise, for on the fatal day, Monday, when Miss Harmer, nicely dressed, would be selling lemonade in Instow, I must be at the Broughton Bank Holiday Fete and Sports. On the Friday, I must set out to make my way there and to see if I could find some audiences on the way. I feel like sometimes there should be a little bit of mood music as I transition from one chapter to the next. Wow, 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 wow. One of these days I should get myself more organised, and I will be here with the harmonica, playing Genevieve, the theme of the film. Anyone know how the Genevieve theme goes? Just trying to remember it. Was it Larry Adler who did the theme of Genevieve, didn't he? It'll come to me. How are we doing? Sounds like Nora Batty. what the sensible housewife. Get over here, get out of it. We're at the end of this book looking at page... we are near the end of this book looking at the pages. We need to think of another book, we may finish this week. You never know your misfortune. Plymouth Hoe is in Devon. Remember watching the Queen's Golden Jubilee in 2002. The Hoe on the big... Oh, Plymouth Hoe. There we are. Oh, yes. Hoe as opposed to Hoe without the E. The Hoe is on the big TV screens whilst a student at university. Oh, there you go. No capable housewife in my house, says the lovely Julia. We're 1626. Anybody do a 1626 for the door? No joy on that one. Jen Colley says, what does a capable housewife look like? I know. How can you tell? I think that's hilarious. How dare you, the blooming cheek of it, capable housewife. She has to wear a printed pinny. Absolutely. Sounds like Nora Batty. In that case, I am not, says Jen Colley. And Michael White says, Facebook was blocking the word hoe in articles, thinking it was something to do with the slang American word for ladies of the night. Crossfade yourself. Oh, yes, I shall have to crossfade myself. Dudley Sawyer. Hello, bit late. I'll sit on the cheap seats at the back. I should jolly well hope so. We do need a written excuse, you know. We are now on chapter 18. How many chapters are there in the book? There is a little map in the back there. Sorry we haven't been looking up the places that we've been going to on this one. 24 are the number of chapters. It was in the evening, after passing through Barnstaple, that I was sitting on a grassy bank among the wild flowers, enjoying, poet-like, the serene evening among the lovely meadows and cornlands, when I suddenly found myself surrounded by a group of curious children with 2 perambulators and a battered old pair of perambulator wheels. They demanded information about my conveyance. What was it? And who was I? But they had never seen a Punch and Judy show, and I couldn't make them understand. All the same, somehow or other, they got very excited. They wanted to see the Peep Show. They insisted upon seeing it, and they urged me to visit their village of Ashford, which they described as a fair-sized village with lots of houses, a good few people, and a splendid open space outside their house where I could perform. By this time I was excited too, and shouting to them to come on. I set out along the road at the head of the cavalcade of 6 children, 1 baby and 2 perambulators and a pair of wobbly old wheels. Is that what you... I just looked at my finger there and I realised, is that what you meant when I said I've been cleaning out the essay? That's me picking out my nose, mate, that one. We spread ourselves over the road and chattered along, all talking 90 to the minute. 2 of the boys were brothers, 10 and 12 years of age, who had wheeled a perambulator full of garden and dairy produce to Barnstaple to sell in the market there. They were nice, frank boys, telling me how they disliked school and how they would much rather be like me and push a show from village to village and live in a tent. The by-road up to Ashford was steep and rough and longer than I had expected, and eventually we arrived at the boys' house, which was a nice old affair of whitewash and thatch, with a walled-in courtyard and garden, with a picturesque roofed gateway leading to it. Unfortunately, as I was concerned, there was not another house within sight, but all the same I set to work and put up the show in the roadway outside the house. Then we walked farther up the hill, where we found a church and 6 more cottages. We invited everyone to come and see the performance, especially Marjorie, a big, stout girl whose birthday it was that very day, and everyone jumped at the idea that I had arrived on purpose to celebrate the festival. About 15 children and adults gathered round, and I set to work with the puppets. These simple folk shouted and laughed, all except the babies in arms, who cried and had to be walked up and down, while Egbert, aged 2 years, rushed up and down in front of the show with a rattly old perambulator playing trains that continually let off steam and whistled with tremendous vigour. They had little pity for the poor artist, but they took up a collection when I finished and presented me with the result, which was 11pence halfpenny. With the help of 5 boys, I pulled into a meadow, and I think the sight of me cooking my supper and a taste of the dish gave them more pleasure than all my artistic efforts with the puppets. The next day, being Saturday, I packed up early so that I could get back to Saunton to show in the afternoon. The return to Saunton was like getting home again. The farmer welcomed me back to his orchard and said that he was glad to have me there because it would keep the people from stealing his fruit. The ice cream man and the donkey man said, "You've come back then, that's right," and grinned cheerfully. And on my way to the shore, 2 boys high up on the hill above the road came chasing down to me with golf clubs in their hands.
You gonna do a peep show on the sands?
Yes?
Ooh, and we're coming to see it. We were going to play golf, but we're going to come down and see the show with you.
I don't know what kind of accent that is. It's not very Devonshire, is it? Anyway, that's what they spoke like. Yeah. And one on either side, they helped shove the old encumbrance up the hill. They chattered away about their little sister who had fallen under the sea and found all its green there and had seen big, big fish. And they told me all about their father who had seen the Peep Show and thought it was very good. But I could not help thinking what their father might have said had he seen these 2 young hopefuls trudging along the road with a showman. The elder boy stood through 3 shows that afternoon and paid his penny like a man each time. I was inclined to refuse his 2nd and 3rd pennies, but I managed to overcome that piece of mawkish sentimentality. In consequence, felt a horrid sneak, let me read that again because I haven't quite got that. I felt inclined to refuse his 2nd and 3rd pennies, but I managed to overcome that piece of mawkish sentimentality, and in consequence felt a horrid sneak, a hard, stony-hearted villain, a brute of a professional, cut off from ordinary, kindly human beings. But it's a rough old place, this world, when you've got a living to get. When I reached the shore, a large picnic party beckoned me to fix up near them, as they had seen part of the performance at Instow, and now they wanted to see the rest of it. And when I was setting up the theatre, children from all directions came with greetings of,
"Hello, Mr. Peep Show man. Hello, mister. I chickie auntie. Where's Martha? Where's Barleycorn? Will it be different or will it be the same? Oh, never mind. We don't mind seeing it all over again."
So we all felt more or less a family party in the democratic atmosphere of the sands that Saturday afternoon. There was only one person who grumbled at the Peep Show, and that was a fond father who had only joined his family half an hour ago after a long absence, and whose daughter had already deserted him to watch the entertainment. And even he wanted to know all about it, and did I do different plays, and would I be there next week? There was an attractive friendliness about these holiday people, especially in the young man who had no change for the collection, but so obligingly went over to the stall, bought an ice in order to change a note, and returned with the ice in one hand and a whole 6pence in the hat for the other. If I was a philosopher, expounding a new theory of living, inventing a new ism, I should call myself a holidayist, for it seems to me that the one thing the world needs to put right is a holiday. There is no doubt whatever about the sort of life nice people want to lead. Whenever they get the chance, whatever they do, they go away to the country or the seaside, they take off their collars and ties, and they have a good time playing at childish games and contriving to eat some simple food very happily without all the encumbrances of tables and chairs. This world might be quite a nice place if only simple people would be content to be simple and be proud of it. If only they would turn their backs on these pompous politicians and ridiculous captains of industry who, when you come to examine them, turn out to be very stupid, ignorant people who are simply suffering from an unhappy mania of greediness, who are possessed with perverse and horrible who are possessed and perverse and horrible devils, which make them stick up smoky factories in glorious alpine valleys, or spoil some simple country by digging up and exploiting its decently buried mineral resources, or whose moral philosophy is so patently upside down when they try to attempt to persuade us that quarrelling and fighting and wars, or these ridiculous accumulations of wealth, are the most important instead of being the most undesirable things in life. If only simple people would ignore them and behave always in a jolly way they do on the seashore, what a nice world we might have to live in. Hear, hear. Luckily, nature has a way with her, and we may rest assured that this wretched machine age will all be over in a year's or so's time. It has grown up as quickly as a mushroom, and like a mushroom, it has no stability. It will die. Will it? Will it, Mr. Wilkinson? Your prediction, unfortunately, is somewhat awry. Although, of course, it does depend on what you call in a few years' time. In the two maidens ladies who appeared that afternoon on the seashore, I saw in one short half hour the way nature has with all artificial things. And I saw too in the man, the superior fellow, who standing on the margin of that lovely sea said, "I can't make out what people come here for. I can't see anything in all this." And he waved his hand carelessly at a scene that it would take a Greek poet to express in words. There is no doubt that this bright seashore rejected him as something abhorrent. And if you had seen him there on the sand in his tight boots and navy blue suit, you might have believed, as I did, that some subtle power in the mind, in the wind, the waves, and the sun had driven him away, and that he had not departed by the power of his own magnificent free will as he thought. As for the two genteel ladies, the forces of nature were more kind and encouraging to them. She firmly but kindly divested them of their affected gentility. They attempted to walk down to the sandbanks in timid steps, but the loose sand carried them down in long slides. They tried to pick their way over the big stones, but these tumbled them from one side to the other. They laughed, they chattered, and began to move freely. Their metamorphosis was gradual, but within half an hour complete. Their elegant boots and stockings, their trim coats and neat hats were an abandoned heap on the sand, and the two ladies were actually paddling in the sea with the wind blowing their hair loose. Thus may all artificial things disappear. Thus, before the wholesome forces of nature will disappear, one day all those messy little steam engines and motor cars that the bad-tempered captains of industry quarrel about and make such a mess with, like so many bad boys. Then we will have a holiday and only do happy things which are good for us. But I suppose many strange things must happen before those charming days arrive. And that evening, at the Staunton farm, I saw an example of the queer change that is creeping over the countryside. The farmer was agitated by a big adventure. He had bought a motor car and was expecting his son to arrive with it every moment. "I lost my old horse last week," he said. "Told doctor I called him. He broke his leg, and I had to have him shot, and he was a good un too. Go, he would go from Barnstable to here in 20 minutes many times. Aye, we knew one another, me and the doctor. He were good for me, and he'd go for me too. He didn't need no whip. You only had to stroke a straw across his tail, and up it'd go. Hang on, I'm just trying to read this. You'd only have to stroke a straw across his tail, and up it'd go his head, and up it'd go his head, and away it'd go, so that nothing could stop him. Yes, and so as my favourite horse was dead, I bought a car. I could get another horse, but 'twould never be the same as the doctor. He'd been a good 'un, and he'd go well, but he wouldn't be the doctor. So I thought I'd have a car. The boy's gone to fetch him now. The boy's gone to fetch him home now. I had the bill this morning. 350 I paid for him. The boy's going to learn to drive and I'll learn from the boy. Yes, now I won't be dependent on the bus or the train. Can come and go as I like. Needn't stay in the market for hours when 'tain't necessary. Can come along home when I like. There was, consequently, a sorry spectacle outside the old Devonshire farm that evening. The car had arrived, and Farmer Hernman was being shown over it by the agent. It was a long, elegant grey affair, which, against the heroic old wagons and the farmer's own immense figure, looked like a gimcrack toy made of tin. The agent was diving under the lids and explaining the intricacies to the farmer, who, in his braces and his riding breeches unlaced at the knees, was scratching his head in perplexity. And to everything he replied, "Oh, the boy'll learn to drive, and I'll learn from me." And I imagine he would leave it to the boy to reconcile this town rat of a car to life on a Devon farm. And there we come to chapter 14. But I might think we leave it there for the morrow. What's he thinks about that then, my gentle listener? Does he think that these mechanical whatnots will take over the world? Will we see more than that motor car with this sort of strange complexity underneath that baffles the brains? Or do you think we'll go back to the horse and cart like what my father had, and his father before him, and his father before him, and my great-great-great-father had, and his great-great-great-grandfather had before him, I think. Not sure how great he was. Phew. Anyway, there we go. Michael White says, Facebook... Oh, I've read all that. Yeah, the Coopers will be bringing back the popcorn. So, no parcel this evening. I know I'm cutting you a bit short, but I don't really want to start the next chapter too early on. I hope that's all right. I hope you'll forgive me. Plus the fact we don't want to finish the book too quickly, and we need to find another book, don't we? We've got to get something in. It may be that we read the next book. We might read is this one here. Neighbourhood by Tickner Edwards. We haven't done a Tickner Edwards for a while. We might read that. And then we can sort something else out. I got War and Peace on the shelf somewhere. No, I haven't actually. I haven't got that book. That farmer will be disappointed, I think, says Anne H. I think you're right. I think that farmer will be dreadfully... Mind you, my son will learn how to drive it, and I'll learn from me. There you are, see? That's how it works. Anyway, no winners on the parcel bingo, says Turbo. Yeah, sorry about that. If wishes were horses, says the lovely Julia. If wishes were horses, horses would run the courses. Well, there we go. I'm going to need to go and prepare myself for the Vogue show. I need to sort out some food and stoke the fires. So I shall pop off a little bit early. I'm sorry about that. No worries. It's been another delightful read. Thank you again. No point pushing it to the end of the hour when we've got to a satisfactory moment. It gives you all a bit of a chance to whatever it is. But anyway, thank you very much. I will see you later. Thank you for following and subscribing and becoming patrons and supporting what I do. And where is my hat? A few pennies there and a few pennies for the performer. Until next time, arrivederci. Ta-ta for now.